Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, at first glance, with qualifying for the state's fall elections now complete, the status quo seems to be the early frontrunner. Not so, though, in Jefferson Parish, where voters are assured of electing a new parish president. We will examine some of the key statewide and local elections tonight and what they mean for future politics. We'll also look at the latest on the short-term rental controversy and at some new property tax assessments where there are high bills and hard feelings. Addressing those stories are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Tyler Bridges, reporter, the Times-Picayune New Orleans Advocate. Jeff Adelson, reporter, the Times-Picayune New Orleans Advocate, and also from the same daily, columnist Stephanie Grace. All right, E, you wanted to just sort of address the fact, because you guys might have noticed, but we sort of have a new look around here right now.
I hope they notice if anybody's a regular watcher. and they say, hey, something's different. Yeah, the last few weeks we've had a different studio, and we thought we owed it to you to explain what's going on here. What happened is that when this new facility was built, it was built actually with 3 studios with the capacity, with the hope to be able to house more independent productions like movies and television programs. That is starting to happen, including in the largest studio, which is the one that we used in the past. And so the independent productions are taking up more and more of our facilities, which is good for the station. And so this show is moving to different studios. There's 2 different studios, and which one we wind up in, we're not sure right now. And so for the next few weeks, I guess you could say, we're in a temporary position. And anytime you change studios, it creates issues with lighting and with cameras. I know we've had some complaints that some of the camera shots have been really disturbingly close in the past few weeks. And while all of our panelists are universally beautiful, no one wants to see all their pores, and we understand that. And so we're working on the camera shots, and we think maybe like about 2 or 3 weeks we'll be where we're going. And so just watch us. But one good thing out of the change is the table. We have a round table now, whereas in the past we always had like a half circle table. And for a discussion, having a round table is a lot better, because everybody can see each other and shake their fingers at each other better and all that.
You're right.
And so that's better. The other thing we wanted to mention, though, on the positive side, is that 2 weeks ago at the awards for the Press Club of New Orleans, in the cherished category of Best Talk Show, Informed Sources won first place. Now everybody who wants to enter that category gets to make 2 entries, and actually the show won first and second place, so we beat ourselves in first place. But we're just very, very proud to have won that. So we're number 1, even though we're vagabonds in terms of studios.
right
and
now.
we're number 2.
Yeah, really, and we're number 1 and 2 because of the great reporters that we have joining us every week too. People have really enjoyed our talk show and have done so for 35 years and hope they continue to do so.
And because of the camera shots that we've kept back. So
They're kind of scared of everybody. Really, some people were kind of startled. And I want to say that right now we're in the Charlie and Jeanette Kornman Performance Studio here at WYES, which is our newest studio, and surrounding us are wonderful photos by local photographer P.J. Hahn. Thank you again, P.J. Beautiful photos. And like Errol said, in 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to be settled down into our permanent digs. So just put up with us right now and still enjoy the show, because we still have these wonderful reporters to talk about what's happening in our community. And
I hope we don't blow it tonight.
Really, the pressure's on you right now.
I will say those of us at the paper have moved a lot in recent years, so we're used to it.
Okay, we're going to start off our discussion right now with Tyler, because we are in a governor's race. It's really not too far away, the primary.
Yeah, October 12th.
Yeah, that's coming up pretty soon.
Yeah, less than about, 8 weeks?
Yeah, so how's it looking right now?
Well, John Bel Edwards continues to be the front runner. I think probably Ralph Abraham, the Republican congressman from Northeast Louisiana, is second, and Eddie Rispone, the businessman, is third. But one thing that is probably new is our viewers, I'm assuming, have seen their TV ads, because all candidates are now on TV with their advertising.
Right, and including Mrs. Edwards, our First Lady. There's a couple of spots that are running where she's really emphasizing what John Bell has done for education and teacher pay raises. So John Bell is the incumbent. People around the state have really liked him, but he's also a Democrat in a Republican state. So what's the strategy there?
What is his strategy? Well, he's talking about how the state has gone from a deficit that he inherited from Bobby Jindal to a surplus. He's talking about education, that there's now money for a teacher pay raise this past legislative session, also funding money for early childhood education, reversing the budget cuts of Governor Jindal for higher education. He also talks about the economy, although there's some debate about job creation under him. But there's also a sense that I think among a lot of people that the state is heading in the right direction. Now his opponents are saying he's tied in with the trial lawyers, so there's not oil and gas drilling like there should be, that there's been a population loss in the state since he became governor, and they're putting the blame on him for that.
Well,
Go ahead.
the guy who was governor longer than anybody else, Edwin Edwards, was a Democrat who was tied in with the trial lawyer. I mean, the state's been governed by that for a long time. John Bel Edwards, he's a Democrat, but he's a conservative Democrat. And I think it makes a difference. And I think the party is not the same thing on the state level as it is on the national level, where people are just really kind of passionate about party. I think there's more of a
Yeah, and so much of the strategy of the two main Republican challengers is Trump, 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 Trump. It's really trying to tie themselves to the national party. And John Bel is, this isn't a national race, is his way of looking at it, and I think that helps him.
Good.
Well, but there's also some challenges or potential threats there, like he's taken some flack from his base on his anti-abortion stance.
Correct,
He hasn't yet had, I think, faced much pushback on guns or some of the other issues where he's a little more conservative than New Orleans Democrats, at least.
So probably in terms of kind of holding on to his Democratic base, the fact that the Republicans are reminding them that they're Trump people helps him bring these people back home.
The liberal side of his base, what there is of it, has nowhere else to go.
Exactly.
They have no choice.
They could stay home.
Yeah.
And there were people threatening to after he signed the abortion bill, which is very controversial. I feel like people will come back to him when they compare him to the alternatives.
So is the governor in a race, would you say? Or is it, is he going to is he confident, really confident to win this? Or does he really have some serious competition?
I must say, I've given up on trying to predict races. Not that I ever really did, but given what happened in the 2016 presidential election, where everybody said that.
And even 2015, here, John Bel.
Well, yeah, for a long time, he was the long shot candidate.
Yeah.
There's a book in that title.
I believe there is a book with
read it.
that title. Yeah, I hear it's good too. I think it's fair to say he is the front runner at this point. I think that he's either going to win in the first election or he's going to fall short by a few points, perhaps, and that's what the Republicans are hoping, obviously.
And
that's
Stephanie,
really
while you
the
make
thing
that
to
point, I'm just
watch.
going to ask, could you all put the list up again of all of the candidates that are up there?
There have been gubernatorial elections in the past when you had these candidates and people would say, if only this person would get in, it would change everything. They used to say that about John Breaux, for example. There hasn't been that person out there other than John Kennedy. I mean, once John
Scalise,
Kennedy
too.
decided he wasn't going to run, it was really just wide open at this point.
Okay, so you can see that there are a lot of candidates really on the ballot right now.
And
Stephanie,
that's
the
an
point
important
that you made-
important point because, as Tyler mentioned, we have a runoff system. John Bel Edwards really wants to win. They might not tell you that in the first. That means no primary, no. If an incumbent doesn't win in the first, and again, a lot of these other candidates could peel off 1 or 2%. He's weakened, then it's a one-on-one, then he's an incumbent who didn't get 50%. So then that becomes, I think, much more of a tough race for him.
And that's where Donald Trump could come in and potentially sway an election in this Republican state.
And then look at, there's a candidate named Landrieu on the ballot who is not a sibling, who's a cousin, and he's an independent, but maybe some Democrats.
He's run many times before.
Maybe
He's
some,
never run.
And he's
but you
very
never
different
know.
than Barry and Mitch.
It is, but I mean, just the name, you don't know.
Okay.
It's-
All right, so what, about 6 weeks to go for the primary, and we'll be
October
seeing
12th.
a lot of politicking for governor between now and then. But JP race, Jefferson Parish,
Yes.
we do know that the incumbent is not seeking re-election.
We do. We had to wait until the last day of qualifying for him to make it official. But Mike Yanni has long been thought to probably not be running, but he didn't make it official. Of course, he was elected in he was the generational candidate who was elected 4 years ago, who was supposed to modernize Jefferson Parish, make it more appealing for young families, things like that. And pretty soon after he took office, he had this sexting scandal where he was discovered to have had a telephone relationship with a teenage boy, and it was investigated. There were never any charges, but it's just hung over him all this time. There was a recall drive that failed because the bar for that is very high. Most of the other officials in the parish called for him to resign. He was banned from the schools. He's just had this cloud over him the whole time. And he's been working as parish president all this time, and he had a 60% approval rating. I mean, things have been going fine, I think, in terms of how he's done the job, but we were heading this way.
When you have a parish president who's not allowed to go on school grounds, that's a bad sign.
It's a bad sign, and powerful people have been talking about running whether he ran or not, and in fact, that's what we have. We have a race between Cynthia Lee Shang, the longtime city parish councilwoman, who's also the daughter of Harry Lee, and John Young, the former parish president, and there's one other candidate.
They're both strong candidates, aren't they?
They are, yes, and they're both. It's interesting. My editor mentioned a changing of the guard. It's the Yenny family, the Yenny name, of course, is such a big name in Jefferson Parish, but so is the Lee name, and so are kind of all these other names in Jefferson Parish. So you don't. It's not like it's going to be outsiders coming in. It's just different people, and so that's going to be a big race. Another race that turned suddenly interesting was the sheriff's race, because Joe Lopinto, of course, was just elected after Newell Norman resigned against Johnny Fortunato, the longtime sheriff's spokesman. He's now running as the incumbent for the first time, and all of a sudden there's Johnny Fortunato again qualifying to run against him, and immediately there was scandal because Lopinto accused Fortunato of basically calling him up and saying he wouldn't run against him if Lopinto helped him become chief of the Causeway Police, and Fortunato denies that. So it's, that one's kind of juicy too. It's Lopinto. It's once you're an incumbent, once you've been elected, and certainly so recently, I think it's hard for anyone to dislodge you.
And during the
So
brief time he's been
safe.
sheriff, there's been a lot of high-profile crimes, which has put him on the camera, on the scene, and he's
good at that.
He's had a real public appearance.
He has, and you're starting to hear from other officials who maybe were with Fortunato last time who were saying, you know what, he's doing a good job. He's doing everything he said he would do. I'm going to be with him this
certainly
time.
Jefferson Parish residents have really gotten to know him because of his many appearances before the camera. And then a few other races unopposed for major positions in Jefferson Parish.
Ricky Template, his opponent dropped out, so he will now be an at-large member. The other at-large seat is Paul Johnston, the veteran councilman, versus Scott Walker, who some people would remember from when he was a television anchor. He now sells donuts.
Coroner is unopposed.
Assessor's unopposed, clerk is unopposed.
DA is unopposed.
DA is next year, actually.
Oh, okay.
So the most interesting race, I think, is going to be the parish council district that's now represented by Mark Spears. There are 11 candidates in there. There are a lot of names you would remember. Derek Shepard, remember, who went to prison. He was in the legislature, went to prison, got out. He's trying for a comeback. Cedric Floyd, who's a longtime school board member, very controversial one. 2 former councilmen, Donald Jones and Byron Lee. There's a challenge against Lee. So that one's just going to be kind of raucous.
Okay, all righty.
Yeah.
We'll
So for
have a
people
little
who
bit more
like
political
that.
discussion about some other races later on in the show, but right now I'm going to go over to Jeff and short-term rentals. I mean, you talk about a controversial issue. Council reached a decision. Are we clear on what it is?
We're pretty clear on what it is at this point. And this is sort of the final outcome of what's now been almost a year and a half of studying and debate and discussion at the council level about how the city should revise its short-term rental rules. And your viewers probably remember back about 2 years before this council took office, previous council set in place a bunch of rules that legalize short-term rentals for the first time. This is people who are renting out anything from a room in their house to a whole house to tourists on Airbnb, HomeAway, those sorts of sites. That generated a lot of pushback as these short-term rentals really proliferated across the city. So the new council came in on a pledge that they were going to rein them in. In a lot of ways, that's what they did. That's what the rules that they passed last week are going to do. Under the rules,
You made a distinction.
well, we don't know what's going to happen, and that's a key part of this.
Enforcement is certainly a key part of it, and that's always the issue.
Oh,
So
yeah.
the new rules are,
The new rules are, if you're renting if you want to use a residential property as a short-term rental, you have to have a homestead exemption on it. That means you have to live on the property. It has to be your primary residence. In that case, you can rent out the other half of your double. If you live in a quadruplex, you can rent out 3 other units on your property.
and that's year-round.
That's
There's
year-round.
Because there had been a limit in the number of days before, which
Right.
wasn't really followed.
And you could
so.
also move out for a while and have someone stay at your place.
Right, you could, or you can even just say, I've
or
got
a
a spare
room.
bedroom
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I just want to put that up. And people do that.
But commercial is what was getting a little confusing.
Yeah, so commercial is confusing. Commercial also became probably the most controversial part of this. So on the commercial side, the new rules going forward will mean that commercial properties, and when we're talking commercial properties, we're not just talking about high rises in the CBD, we're talking about corner stores in neighborhoods, most of the commercial corridors in the city. Those properties are going forward, have a cap, so only 25% of the units within them can be used for short-term rentals. But that rule doesn't go into effect until December 1st. And until then, people can still get licenses for as many as they want in those units, and then those licenses are going to be grandfathered in. The residential licenses, everyone who had one for these temporary rentals that you could rent out certain times a year, those all go away, but the commercial ones are going to stay grandfathered in. So that's somewhat controversial. Because a lot of housing advocates had hoped that once these new caps came in, and they had hoped the caps would also be tied to affordable housing requirements, which didn't get passed yet anyway. So they were hoping these caps would actually help reduce the number of short-term rentals, and that frees up units that could then go to long-term renters, help with the affordable housing crisis, that sort of thing.
You use the word yet, so it's all really not 100% settled?
The short-term rental debate I've been covering the short-term rental debate in this city since 2013 or thereabouts. I don't know when the debate is actually going to be done. I think, a lot of the officials are hopeful that once they can finally make a few more tweaks on the current ones, we've got a good set of rules that could be enforced and will work. We'll see if
But you
if
have
that
a new
actually.
council and a new mayor, so
Yeah.
how has that changed the equation?
Well, I mean, I think without a new council and a new mayor, you wouldn't have these rules. The council all ran on restricting short-term rentals. The Landrieu administration were the architects of the previous rules, which were written, in partnership with Airbnb. So you had this council come in, and after hearing a lot of backlash of short-term rentals in the community, and literally one of the first things they did was start working on this. I don't think that would have happened had there not been an election that turned over the council, or
The administration.
or the administration,
Because LaToya Cantrell, even though she was on the council that passed these initial regulations, has stayed out of it.
completely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have to get off
Sorry.
short-term rentals, because I know we're going to be talking about it in the future. But first, I wanted, Errol, just to quickly touch, and we're going to go back to politics, some statewide elections that are
Well,
coming
there's a
up.
bunch of them, but a couple of them that I think stand out because, part of understanding this election is it's going to really set the stage for the election 4 years from now, because John Bell Edwards is going to be term limited, assuming he wins. And so I think a lot of people, when they were strategizing, they were really thinking 4 years from now, let's give it to him now, let's let him finish out his term, instead of electing somebody else who's going to be in for 8 years, and let's move in. So I think there's a couple of people who might be in a position to want to make that move in 4 years from now. One of them is Lieutenant Governor Billy Nungasser, and he only has one opponent. Originally he had two, but one of them dropped out, so he's got a guy named Willie Jones, who's a Democrat, who's running against him. But what's interesting about Nungasser's politics, I think he really surprised a lot of people when he ran for lieutenant governor. John Young, I think a lot of people perceived that he was going to be the winner. What they didn't realize is that Billy Nungasser had 2 home bases. He was past parish president of Plaquemines Parish, but yet he had moved to Lafayette, And so he had a big home base in Lafayette. And then plus his father had been head of the Republican Party for many years. And then plus when they had the BP oil spill, he was on TV almost every night.
Yeah.
And so he was a lot stronger force than people realized when he was elected governor. And as lieutenant governor, if you play that position right, you get to go to a lot of parties, you get to do a lot of upbeat sorts of things. You're always dealing with positive things.
Seafood competitions.
There's a new
chefs,
program
yeah.
that's going to start, and kind of thing. And so you can really sell yourself as a lieutenant governor. Now, there are very few lieutenant governors who've gone on to be elected from being lieutenant governor. Kathleen Blanco was an exception, so it hasn't been an automatic stepping stone, but you can kind of see he might be in a position because nobody has had the home base that he has. So I think he's going to be someone to watch for the next 4
Attorney
years.
General, let me get you to move over to that.
The Attorney General, Jeff Landry, has been very, very controversial, but he only has one opponent also, a guy named Ike Jackson. And so it seems like he's going to be an easy winner, too. And so you can see right now the stage almost being set for, like, Nungesser and Jeff Landry. And I just want to acknowledge Jim Donlin, who's only has one opponent, will probably be reelected. But the insurance commissioner's race job for about 12 years or so had a lot of turnover. A lot of the insurance commissioners got in trouble. A couple of them went to jail. And it has stabilized under him. And so I think he'll
he's
finish
seeking
out.
re-election also. With
And
what
carrying on that
party?
Donlin legacy from
Okay.
Jefferson
Jefferson
Parish.
Parish.
Make a quick point about the statewide elections. It shows the weakness of the Democratic Party
yeah.
of Louisiana. There is not a solid, strong Democratic candidate for any of those statewide offices.
Even though we have a
other than
Democratic
the
governor.
Yeah, even though we
Yeah.
have a Democratic governor.
A lot of times, like Congress would be somewhere where you get a candidate for governor and you don't have one except for Cedric Richmond. And so there's just not enough Democrats in that
Right.
office.
And I wanted you, Stephanie, also to quickly touch on some other local races because we're running
Before
out of
I
time.
do that, very quickly, you mentioned Congress. Throw the name Garrett Graves in there to watch for 4 years from now, a member of Congress.
I think you're right about that, yes.
Legislative races.
Yes.
There's a lot of turnover this year, and we've talked about this before because this is the big term limits turnover year. So there are a bunch of interesting races around the metro area. Some names, very familiar names, are gone. John O'Leary, of course, being the biggest one. He was the Senate president. He was replaced by someone else with a familiar name, Patrick Connick, who didn't even have an opponent. So he just walked right into that race in Jefferson Parish. Orleans is losing Neil Abramson, Walt Leger, J.P. Morrell. So 3 real big hitters. We've known that for a long time, all to term limits. At the last minute, Wesley Bishop, a state senator, retired too. So that's a number of seats. There are going to be really hotly contested races in 3 of those. In the J.P. Morrell seat, which actually is a Senate seat that also goes to St. Bernard and West Jefferson, 2 incumbent House members running against each other, Joseph Bowie and John Bagneris. In the 2 uptown seats, the Leger seat and the Abramson seat, really big fields of strong candidates. So I'm in one of them. I'm getting so much mail already. In Jefferson Parish, something again interesting. If you live in a certain part of Metairie, you could be represented by 2 Henrys, brothers. Cameron Henry, who we've talked a lot about on the show, he was the House Appropriations Chairman, kind of the thorn in the side of John Bell Edwards. He is term limited. He's running for Senate. His brother, Charles, is running for his House seat. The other thing they both have in common, in addition to being Henrys, is they both worked for Steve Scalise. So that's a direct line there. Cameron Henry, in the legislative office, Charles Henry in the congressional office. Stephanie Hilferty is another one. So she's in an Orleans district that also goes into Jefferson.
Along the lake.
Along the lake. She's one of these moderate Republicans who kind of gets it from both sides. She's getting it from both sides in this election. She has a Democrat running against her and also a more conservative Republican.
Okay.
So a lot going on in a lot of different corners of the metro area.
And again, primary October
12th, is it?
12th, is it?
October 12th,
Yes.
yeah. And I would just ask viewers to get educated. There's so
Yeah.
much information that's available online. First, find out who the candidates are in your district and get educated.
And one thing to keep in mind is whoever is elected to the legislature this year gets to draw the lines for the next 10 years after the census. So this is a big deal.
Yeah, real important.
Yeah.
All right, thanks. I'm going to wrap up with you, Jeff. Property taxes, property tax assessments, and people are, kind of thunderstruck right now.
Sure, it's we're seeing some pretty dramatic increases in a lot of New Orleans. This is this year's big 4-year reassessment. It's really the first time New Orleans has had what's supposed to be a citywide reassessment in recent history. It's not quite a full citywide assessment because the assessor didn't get to about a quarter of the city.
But it's by law.
It is by law.
It's supposed to be every 4 years, the entire city. So what happened?
The assessor says he basically ran out of time before he could finish and certify, or not certify, but finalize the assessments in those areas. He says he'll be coming back and doing those properties next year, so they're not, it's just a temporary reprieve, not a full one. But a lot of areas of the city are seeing, 100%, 200% increases, some areas more. There's about 24,000 properties across the city that are increasing by more than 50% in value.
And so it's really given people sticker shock, but they can appeal, but it's a limited time in which they can appeal.
Sure. This week is the end of this coming week is going to be the end of the appeals process. Formal appeals are due by August 22nd, and viewers can go to the assessor's website, and there's an online form they can fill out. They can also go to the assessor's office and sort of plead their case in person in what's known as an informal appeal by August 19th, or you can do both.
And just try, and then also you can also, some people are eligible to have their taxes frozen and capped, but if you want it to be at this year's level, you got to move quickly.
Yeah, those deadlines are also coming up in the next week, and that's for senior citizens, disabled people that are within certain income levels.
Okay, the paper on the website has a really great interactive site too to see where the higher assessments are coming in, what hasn't been assessed yet. Take a look at it, it's really great. Okay, time to look at E.
Yeah, this isn't as much looking ahead as just looking back at something sad, though. I just want to acknowledge the death of Joelle Meijer, who died during this past week. She was a real community activist. A real force in New Orleans politics has been the women acting behind the scenes, like in the League of Women Voters, which she was president of, and the League of Women Voters at the state level, and she was on several boards and commissions. Kept a real eagle eye on state government. Also, she was a big supporter of the station, and she was a big fan of this show, and kept an eagle eye on this show also.
Yes, she did.
And quite often we'd hear from her after, and so hers is a voice that's going to be missed in many ways.
Condolences to her family. Tyler?
Yeah, so I covered the aviation board meeting yesterday, and no update on when the new terminal will be opening. They're saying it'll be sometime in the fall, but everyone should be aware that the existing terminal is going to shut down, and the terminal that's on the side of the airfield that's closer to I-10 will open up, although the roadway is not yet ready.
Okay, we'll be looking for that. See how that's going to work quickly, guys.
We are heading into peak hurricane season. It's clear out there right now, but watch out.
We want to keep it that way. Steph?
In addition to all these other races we're talking about in Orleans Parish, a bunch of interesting ballot questions October and November, including one on a new millage against the backdrop of these property tax increases.
I'm sure we'll be talking about that in the weeks to come too.
Yes.
Thanks a lot for being here. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.